Julia Gillard shrugs off her brush with angry protesters as Indigenous leaders condemn the behaviour of the angry mob that surrounded the Prime Minister. 6 a.m, Friday, January 27th. Good morning, everyone. I'm Ron Wilson.
And I'm Ellie Southwood. Welcome to 10's Early News. Also this morning, northern New South Wales is told to brace for more misery, with flooding set to worsen into the weekend.
In sport, paceman Peter Siddle has bowled Australia into a dominant position at stumps on day 3 of the 4th Test against India.
And in finance, the IMF downgrades Australia's growth outlook and says we need to prepare for a global downturn. Here's a brief check of today's weather. More heavy rain and storms on the way for northern New South Wales and Queensland, and tropical cyclone Iggy will deepen off the northwest coast. A high will keep the south mostly clear and the west will again be hot. Indigenous leaders have condemned the behaviour of Aboriginal protesters who tried to storm a Canberra restaurant where the Prime Minister was presenting Australia Day medals. Julia Gillard and opposition leader Tony Abbott had to be dragged to a waiting car by their security detail as the situation got out of hand.
Once the leaders were gone, it didn't stop them. Police used shields, a defence formation, even fists to try to keep the crowd under control.
Put that spear away!
The mob had surrounded a restaurant where the Prime Minister was handing out Australia Day awards to emergency service personnel. The protest launched by Aborigines from the nearby Tent Embassy. They interpreted earlier comments made by Tony Abbott that the embassy, now in its 40th year, should be shut down.
A lot's changed since then, and I think it probably is time to move on from that.
Tony Abbott should be able to move with
They also want the government to hand back land to Indigenous people. It only would have been a matter of about 5 minutes before the handful of protesters banging on the windows turned into about 500 or so. Police are urging them to go, but they say they're not going to leave until their message gets listened to. And I can tell you, tempers are extremely high. Police defended their tactics.
Even though it was a bit of a scuffle, I wouldn't say a siege, but they moved back on our direction. Fantastic response. Happy with the fact that nobody was hurt, nobody's been arrested.
The scenes have been condemned by Indigenous elder Mick Gooder, who's appalled by the lack of respect shown to the Prime Minister and opposition leader.
And I'm fine. I mean, the only thing that really kind of angers me about it is it disrupted such a wonderful event.
Amanda Hart, 10 News.
Gold Coast tennis star Bernard Tomic is considering filing a complaint against police after being issued with 2 traffic infringements yesterday afternoon. The 19-year-old locked himself inside his home after being stopped and fined twice in just over 2 hours for breaching his P-plate licence. Under special conditions on his licence, Tomic is banned from driving his $150,000 V8 BMW, except while travelling between home and training. Residents on the New South Wales mid-north coast are bracing for more rain and flooding. The SES is working frantically to help residents in Coffs Harbour as caravan parks and homes are engulfed.
Oh, we just had cyclonic rain and the gutters couldn't handle the water. The creeks broke their banks. It was high tide.
We've only just recovered probably in the last couple of months from our last flood. So we're at it again now.
The rain has forced the closure of the Pacific Highway in both directions between Coffs Harbour and Grafton. A driver involved in a police pursuit in Melbourne has lost his fight for life. Police gave chase after the 26-year-old did a U-turn to avoid a breath test in Abbotsford yesterday. The pursuit came to an end a short time later when the Nissan Skyline slammed into a pole on busy Hoddle Street. The driver, who suffered critical injuries in the collision, died in hospital just before 1 o'clock this morning. The Police Ethical Standards Department is investigating. Police have praised the behaviour of Australia Day revellers, even though 110 people were arrested in New South Wales alone. Attendance was down at many celebrations this year because of wet weather along the east coast. In New South Wales, 150 charges were laid, but police say that shouldn't reflect on the success of the day.
Whilst there have been more arrests than New Year's Eve and certainly more arrests than what we had last year, many of those arrests were for very lower level type crimes where police were on hand to intervene immediately.
Police are also investigating an assault in Tamarama in Sydney's east. They allege 4 members of the Bra Boys surf gang threw a pot plant onto a man's balcony, then kicked the 38-year-old in the head until he was unconscious. He's in hospital in a stable condition. The man whose breast implant company sparked an international health scandal is under arrest and could be charged with manslaughter. Jean-Claude Masse was arrested at his home in southern France.
Police speed along a driveway in the south of France before dawn. They're looking for Jean-Claude Masse, the man at the heart of the breast implant scandal. They find him at his girlfriend's home, and moments later he's under arrest on suspicion of involuntary manslaughter and causing injury. He remains in the house while officers search it, looking for evidence of a scandal that has 40,000 victims in the UK alone.
My client is not fine, he's tired and hasn't slept.
Masse arrived at a police station in Marseille a few hours after his arrest. Officers now have 48 hours to charge him. He has been questioned before when this photo was taken, but then the subject was fraud and deceptive business practices. The new charges are far more serious. Despite running an implant business, Masse has no medical training. When first questioned by police, he said women were only complaining to get money out of him. But we now know up to 400,000 women worldwide have PIP breast implants made with industrial-grade silicone. They in turn live with the fear they'll rupture or leak. The now defunct factory tells its own story, ransacked and derelict, yet no one wants to take the boxes of discarded implants.
Sports news, and paceman Peter Siddle has bowled Australia into a dominant position at stumps on day 3 of the 4th Test against India. Siddle claimed 5 wickets as his brilliant summer continued. Virat Kohli was fired up for the tourists, providing the only real resistance with a century.
Some Australia Day banter was nothing to worry about, according to the Aussies.
It was a matter of just settling him down and making sure he got over the line.
Well, in Sydney, they were after me because I wasn't scoring, and today they were pissed because I got 100. So
the Australian bowlers have bedevilled the visitors all series.
Edge and gone. Terrific take. Ricky Ponting is in the match again.
From curator to wicket taker, Nathan Lyon claimed his first Test victim at the venue where he previously worked.
Oh, big appeal, and he's gone.
An eventful hour after the tea break as Peter Siddle took back-to-back wickets. The hat-trick didn't happen, a verbal stoush did. Virat Kohli versus Ben Hilfenhaus. It spurred the Indian onto 3 figures.
He's done it, and well-deserved, well played.
Soon after, it was all over, but Michael Clarke opted against enforcing the follow-on. The Aussies lost quick wickets, including under-pressure Shaun Marsh for another duck, as they built on their first innings lead.
The Adelaide wicket's probably one that's you don't really want to be batting on last, so it's we didn't have to think too much about that. It was just a matter of getting out there now and batting for a bit of time, getting a bit of time out of the game, but still scoring some runs.
Nick Wood, 10 News.
Rafael Nadal is through to the men's final of the Australian Open after a brilliant 4-set win over Roger Federer. The Spaniard pulled off some incredible tennis in the 3rd set to take control of the match. He continued his push into the 4th, simply overrunning the Swiss master. And humble in victory, Nadal revealed he's always looked up to Federer.
The only thing that I did all my career is try to keep learning now, because I always saw in front of me one player better than me.
The women's final has also been decided, with Maria Sharapova and Victoria Azarenka winning through. It is going to be a grunt fest.
I'm not looking forward to it.
No. Ellie, Southwood now with finance. Growing evidence that Australia's growth is going to be affected by the international economic outlook.
We might be a long way away, Ron, but we're certainly not immune. The IMF has downgraded Australia's growth outlook, and it's warned the G20 nations to prepare for a downturn. A report for the G20 finance ministers meeting in Mexico shows estimates for Australia's growth have been cut from 3.3% to 3% flat for this year. The IMF wants countries who can to lower their interest rates and allow their budget deficits to get wider, which goes against the Gillard government's plan to return the budget to surplus. Bill Gates has pledged more than $700 million to the struggling Global AIDS Fund. The Microsoft chairman addressed world leaders at the World Economic Forum in Switzerland and called on governments around the globe for continued support.
It frees up funds for Global Fund, and so they can immediately use the money and continue to save lives.
The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has already given $650 million to the fund in the past decade. Taking a look at global stocks now, and as we saw early yesterday, markets have continued to respond positively to the US Federal Reserve's statement on interest rates. Yesterday, the Reserve announced it would keep rates in the US at ultra-low levels until at least 2014, and that's about 18 months longer than previously suggested. The Dow Jones was up early in trade but has dipped on some weak housing data. It's up 1 point, the Nasdaq is down slightly. In Europe, and all the main markets finished higher on the back of that news out of the US. Mining shares were the top gainers. In Asia, and the Nikkei closed in negative territory. It was dragged down from its 3-month high on the back of poor results from robot maker Fanuc. Hong Kong's Hang Seng opened the Year of the Dragon up 1.6%. To the commodities, and both oil and gold have surged on the Federal Reserve statement. Oil is trading at over $100 a barrel. Gold has broken the $1,700 an ounce mark. The Australian dollar is stronger this morning. It's buying 106 US cents and almost 81 euro cents. Our market was closed yesterday with the Australia Day holiday, with the SPI currently pointing to a weaker start to today.
There's a national weather check on your screen. Brisbane thunderstorms today, 27 the top. Sydney showers and 25. Canberra possible shower, 25. Melbourne sunny day, 29 degrees. Hobart sunny and 25. Adelaide sunny, 35 degrees. Perth mostly sunny, again very hot, top of 41 today. And for Darwin thunderstorms and 31 degrees. Let's take a look at what's making headlines in the papers this morning. The Age reports an investigation by Fair Work Australia has made adverse findings against Health Services Union officials, including Federal MP Craig Thompson, Michael Williamson and Kathy Jackson.
The Sydney Morning Herald says 11 new bottle shops have been approved for the city, but others were deferred or rejected because of fears they could harm the community.
In the Australian, Queensland's would-be Premier Campbell Newman is refusing to form a coalition with minor parties in a bid to secure government.
And the Northern Territory News reports on wild storms dampening Darwin's Australia Day.